Who really runs African football? We're going to talk about governance, power, and accountability. African football is more than just a tournament. It's memory, it's migration, it's identity. It's pride that's carried across borders, beyond oceans, off the continent to the world. From Lagos, Nigeria to Lyon, home of Olympique Lyonnais. From Dakar, Senegal to Dortmund, home of Borussia Dortmund. From Cairo, Egypt to Krakow, Poland. From Yaoundé, home of Canon Sportif of Yaoundé, to Yonkers in New York. From Praia in Cape Verde to Portland, home of the Portland Timbers Football Club. From Kinshasa to Kansas, Sporting Kansas City. From Niamey to New York, home of Red Bulls, and equally home of Choupo-Moting, one of Cameroon's great indomitable lions. From Ouagadougou to Orlando, home of Orlando City Soccer. From Soweto, home of Kaiser Chiefs and Orlando Pirates, to Seattle, home of Seattle Sundowns Football Club, with one of the greatest Cameroon captains right now, Nuhu Tulo. This is BallAfrica, where African football tells its own story with context, clarity, precision, and courage. I'm your host, Liese, former athlete, former vice president of the Florida Sports Foundation, and sports consultant. Today, we are talking about something very uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. Who actually runs African football? I'm going to repeat the question again. Who actually runs African football? We're not talking about running African football on paper. We're not talking about press releases. We're talking about the reality. Because football isn't only played on the pitch. It's shaped in boardrooms, in meeting rooms, and in conference rooms. So let's dive into it. There is a myth and there is a reality. Myth versus reality. Let's start with the official structure of African football. At the continental level, you have the Confederation of African Football, CAF. Think about it like CONCACAF for Central America. Think about it like UEFA for Europe. Think about it like AFC, Asian Football Confederation for Asia. This is the governing body of African football. It's called CAF. Under CAF, there are 54 national federations, independent national federations representing each country. Each federation has as a responsibility, it controls the national teams, it controls domestic leagues, it manages and controls youth development programs, licenses systems, referee structures, development funding for the promotion of African football within the continent. On paper, that's fantastic governance, right? It sounds amazing. In practice, real power often sits somewhere else. As they say, follow the money. Sometimes with government ministers or ministries, sometimes it sits with political alliances. Sometimes this power sits with sponsors. Sometimes it sits with individuals whose influence overweighs their title. And this isn't unique to Africa. It's not an African football problem alone. It's across most confederations. But in African football, the consequences are a lot sharper and deeper, and they pierce really hard. Because governance isn't just administrative. It determines whether academies receive funding, whether leagues finish their season, whether players are paid on time, whether referees feel protected, and whether sponsors trust the system. All right, when fans complain about results, are they criticizing the team? Are they criticizing the coach? Are they criticizing the pitch they played on? Are they criticizing the players and the staff, or the structure behind it? Are they criticizing the entire system? Because talent rarely fails alone. Systems fail first. Then talent becomes irrelevant and would fail subsequently. So once again, where does the power lie? We're talking about the myth versus the reality. Now let's transition into another topic of conversation here. And I'm going to take you into real examples across the continent. Let's look at Nigeria, the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Here we're going to examine a case of talent versus a system that's built on tensions. Nigeria, which is arguably the deepest talent pool in world football. We're talking about players like Victor Osimhen, Samuel Chukwueze, Alex Iwobi, Asisat Oshola, Alozie. We're talking about countries of the greats like JJ Okocha, the legends, Sunday Liese, Daniel Amokachi. But the federation has faced recurring issues: player payment disputes, administrative uncertainty, coaching instability, delayed league calendars. Nigeria doesn't struggle with talent. It struggles with institutional continuity and unstable systems and structure. And when the system shakes, the team feels it. It's like an earthquake. Everybody's going to feel it. Nigeria is an example of how talent conflicts with system tensions. And thus, that gives birth to poor results. And trust me, it isn't the Nigerian Football Federation alone to sort out this type of issue. However, they do need to take the lead. One of my favorite successful African football countries, Morocco. Governance and as a strategy has worked so well in Morocco. Morocco didn't reach the World Cup semifinals by accident, nor have they been successful at all levels of the competition of the game on the continent by error. They won the 2025 FIFA U20 World Cup in Chile. They secured a bronze medal at the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. They also won the 2023 U23 Africa Cup of Nations. And they reached the 2025 U17 AFCON finals. They've won the CHAN tournament in 2018, in 2020, and in 2025. Oh my God, look at that history. Look at that. Moroccan clubs are dominant in Africa. We want to think about who? Wydad AC, amazing team. We want to think about Raja, CA, another incredible team. Or do we want to talk about RS Bakene? Fantastic team, winning frequently at CAF Champions League and the Confederation Cup titles. This happened and continues to happen because their federation invested in a long-term structure. They invested heavily in the Mohammed VI football complex. They invested in high-end diaspora scouting pipelines in Europe. Of course, this gave birth to players like Brahim Diaz through the European scouting. They invested in coaching educational programs. They centralized the national team and especially planning of the national team. They brought that together as one. Thus, that gave birth to success. Players like Ashraf Hakimi, Hakim Ziyech, Sofiane Amrabat emerged from a system that prioritized identity and infrastructure. That's governance turning into performance, and the outcome is talent success. This isn't luck. It's a structure. The third example here is South Africa. This is a situation where we're going to look at a professional league and a national pressure. A professional league versus national pressure. South Africa offers a very different model. The South African Premier League, which is the soccer league of South Africa, PSL, is the professional football league in the country. First division, you can call it that way. The PSL is one of Africa's most commercially structured and successful leagues. It has a very strong broadcast deals. It has very consistent scheduling. It has a solid club licensing systems. We all know and heard of the great Soweto rivalry between the Orlando Pirates and the Kaizer Chiefs, or the successes that have been registered recently with Mamelodi Sundowns dominating on the African continent. Yet, the Bafana Bafana and the Banyana Banyana has historically struggled for continental dominance. Hey, I do want to throw a little shout out to Rowan Williams, my man, great goalkeeper for the Bafana national team. Amazing goalkeeper indeed, great talent. Can't wait to see him at the World Cup. But why has there been success on the league and not a lot of success at national team level? Because league governance doesn't automatically translate to national team cohesion. Structures must align across the ecosystem. Bonsoir à mes amis ivoiriens. I'm going to talk about Côte d'Ivoire as another example. This is where governance shifts before success. Because of the shift in governance, success follows. By winning the AFCON in Cameroon in 2023, the Fédération Ivoirienne de Football and les Éléphants de Côte d'Ivoire underwent international restructuring. Technical planning improved drastically, and investment in facilities increased tremendously. There was administrative alignment that was strengthened as well, and they cut out all the administrative red tape. Then the results follow. Football success begins with tactics on the field. It begins with systems that follow these tactics on the field. Cameroon, almighty Cameroon. This is an example of power, politics, and personality. Cameroon. The almighty giants of African football, the indomitable lions of Roger Milla, Patrick Mboma, the Black Spider, Thomas Kono, great inspirator and idol of Italian legend Gianluigi Gigi Buffon, Andrea Onana, and the list is endless. Cameroon is a great example of how personalities can influence the governance of football. Historically, there have always been tensions between the federation leadership, national team staff, and the Ministry of Sports. How they are successful is always a miracle, and they have a great say in Cameroon, impossible n'est pas camerounais, which translates as, nothing is impossible for a Cameroonian. That's why that national team continues to be very successful, despite the differences between the federation and the Ministry of Sports. This has shaped something from coaching appointments to squad selections, team management to expenses, all. When governance becomes contested on contested terrain, contested territory, contested playing field, the players feel it. The coaches feel it. The fans feel it. Football doesn't escape politics. Football mirrors politics. Thus, the result of Cameroon mirrors its football governance. I will end my examples with a very, very success story. Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. Small nation, smart governance, excellent results. Cape Verde offers one of Africa's smartest example of efficiency. With very limited financial resources, they build diaspora scouting systems, stable federation leadership, coaching continuity, strong player relationships. The result? A nation of under 1 million people consistently competes at AFCON very successfully. And in their first time, in the first time in their history, hovered over the mighty Cameroon to qualify for the FIFA 2026 World Cup in the United States. That's governance outperforming budget. Why is governance the real competitive edge? Europe's advantage isn't just the fact that they're financially okay. Europe's advantage, it's its predictability. It is stable, it's consistent, and everyone can predict. Sponsors invest where systems are stable. Broadcasters invest where calendars do not collapse or have a fixed start date to an end start date. African football doesn't lack talent. I can tell you that African football is populated with some of the greatest talent in the world. It lacks institutional reality. The reliability creates leverage in Europe. However, the lack of reliability creates the vacuum in African football. Because football today isn't just a sport, it's an industry. Investors do not ask first about who is the striker, who is the left back, who is the winger, who is the goalkeeper, or who is the coach. They ask about governance. Good governance is the most underrated competitive advantage in African football. Not tactics, not formations, not even the superstars we have. Governance. Because when the system works, talent finally breeds and success is registered. Here's a fun fact for today. Did you know that through FIFA Forward and CAF developmental programs, African federations collectively receive hundreds of millions of dollars each cycle for infrastructure, youth programs, and governance reforms? Hundreds of dollars every cycle. By every cycle, we're talking about every World Cup cycle. Unfortunately, many African federations leave these portions of funds unused. Not because they don't need money, or not because the funding isn't there, simply because of compliance systems. Administrative structures are not strong enough to access this because compliance is a defiance. Which means governance isn't theoretical. It is practical, it's pragmatic, and it has to transcend to performance and results. And it creates financial opportunity. The future of African football will not be decided by one final. It won't be decided by one generation of players. It will be decided by whether institutions become strong. Institutions become stronger than individuals. Because when governance works, players feel protected, sponsors feel confident, fans feel respected. The talent finally gets the stage it deserves. African football finally puts its name and earns the respect it deserves. If this conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you think, prickled you, please like and share. Follow us and subscribe to our channel, BallAfrica, on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Because African football deserves ownership of its own story. I am Liese, and this is BallAfrica. Until next time, keep your eyes on the ball and your heart in the game. Ciao.